Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामीनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 8, Dhruva Mahārāja leaves home. We are in the section, text 63 to 70, where Narada Muni is meeting Uttānapāda and Narada Muni is pacifying Maharaj Uttānapāda. So this is the section 63 to 70. So we come to the next verse, that is 68. Narada uvacha mama sujasvatanayam devaguptam vishampyate tat prabhavan vigyaya prangvrungshe yat yasha jagat. Translation.
The great sage Narada replied, "My dear king, please do not be aggrieved about your son. He is well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although you have no actual information of his influence, his reputation is already spread all over the world." Purport. Sometimes when we hear that great sages and devotees go to the forest and engage themselves in devotional service or meditation, we become surprised. How can one live in the forest and not be taken care of by anyone? But the answer given by a great authority, that is Narada Muni, is that such persons are well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sharanagati or surrender means acceptance or firm belief that wherever the surrendered soul lives, he is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is never alone or unprotected. Dhruva Mahārāja, affectionate father, thought his young boy, only 5 years old, to be in a very precarious position in the jungle, but Narada Muni assured him, "You do not have sufficient information about the influence of your son. Anyone who engages in devotional service anywhere within this universe is never unprotected." Hare Krishna.
Mama sujasvatanaya. So Narada, he began to speak to Uttānapāda. He said, please do not be aggrieved about your son. He is well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by the way, you have no information that his reputation is already spread all over the world. Right. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, sometimes when we hear devotees depending on Krishna, and especially in this case, going to the forest and how he will be taken care, but such personalities are well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, one of the quality of a devotee is called as Abhayam. Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhir. Abhayam is that devotee is fearless because he has full faith in the protection of the Supreme Lord. Avashya Rakshibe Krishna. This is very important. The devotee is never alone or unprotected. His father was thinking Dhruva is only 5 years old and he will be in a very precarious condition in the jungle. But Narada Muni is informing here Uttānapāda that, my dear Uttānapāda, your son is already very famous and he is going to become Yasha Jagat. You know that his Yasha, fame, will spread all over the universe simply by the resolve of performing intense devotional service. Right. And Prabhupada concludes here, anyone who engages in devotional service anywhere within this universe is never unprotected. We see the beautiful story of Lord Mahārāja. There was once very wonderful thing happened. You know that suddenly one brahmachari from one of the ISKCON temple, he went to a nirjan place. He went to a kind of a forest at a Mangalarti time, and he began to sing Mangalarti there. And it had so happened, cutting the big story short, it had so happened that one old devotee was staying in a hut. He has taken Vanaprastha, and he was on the verge of departing from, this world. And this brahmachari, he was singing for him, and hearing the holy names of the Lord, this devotee, he left this world, which is like Ante Narayana Smriti. So we have to be engaged in devotional service, and then protection is on Krishna's side, right? It is Krishna's worry how to protect his devotee. Devotee's worry is how to be engaged in intense devotional service. Text 69. Dushkaram karma krutva lokapalairapi prabhu eshyati acharate acharitah rajan yashah vipulayam stava. Translation.
My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform activities which would be impossible even for great kings and sages. Very soon he will complete his task and come back home. You should know that he will also spread your reputation all over the world. Purport. Here in this verse, Narada Muni has described Dhruva Mahārāja as Prabhu. This word is applicable to Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes the spiritual master is addressed as Prabhupada. Prabhu means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Pada means post. According to Vaishnava philosophy, the spiritual master occupies the post of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or in other words, he is the bona fide representative of the Supreme Lord. Dhruva Mahārāja is also described here as Prabhu because he is an acharya of the Vaishnava school. Another meaning of Prabhu is the master of the senses. Just like the word Swami, another significant word is Shudushkaram, very difficult to perform. What was the task that Dhruva Mahārāja undertook? The most difficult task in life is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Dhruva Mahārāja would be able to do that. We must remember that Dhruva Mahārāja was not fickle. He was determined to execute his service and then come back. Every devotee, therefore, should be determined that in this life he will be able to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by that process go back home, back to Godhead. That is the perfection of the highest mission of life. Hare Krishna.
Narada Muni further described that your son is very competent. And here is addressing Dhruva Mahārāja as Prabhu. He will perform the activities which are impossible. Dushkuram karma krutva lokapalairapi. Even for the great sages, great kings, lokapalas, what is difficult to perform, your 5-year-old son will do. And very soon, achirena, he will complete his task and come back home, and he will spread your glory, reputation all over the world. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that 2 words, Prabhu and Dushkaram. So Prabhu, Narada Muni is describing Dhruva Mahārāja as Prabhu, and Prabhu is also used for, Prabhupada says, the Supreme Lord, and the spiritual master who is called as Prabhupada. So there are 2 meanings of Prabhupada. Prabhupada, one meaning is that one who has taken shelter of the Prabhu very intensely. Here that Prabhu means the Supreme Lord. He is called as Prabhupada. Another meaning of Prabhupada is there are many Prabhus who sit at his lotus feet. Like many devotees are taking shelter of such a personality. He is called as Prabhupada. So according to our Vaishnava philosophy, spiritual master has to be treated as Prabhupada. Sakshad haritvena samasta shastrair yuktastatha bhavyate vasadvi kintu prabhurya priya eva tasya. Right. He is as good as the Supreme Lord because he is a direct representation of the Supreme, but he is not the Supreme Lord. Right. He is as good as, but not simultaneously. Prabhu also means master of the senses. Prabhupada says another word here important is dushkaram. That means very, very difficult to perform. Now, what is very difficult to perform? To please the Supreme is extremely difficult. So now all the contradictions they resolve within the personality of Godhead. To please the Supreme is extremely easy. As patram pushpam phalam toyam. And to please the Supreme, apart from the path of devotional service, is also extremely difficult. So, and in general, to please the Supreme is extremely difficult. But Dhruva will be able to perform this activity, and then he will come home. And Prabhupada says, this should be the task of every devotee, that he should resolve to satisfy the Supreme in this life and go back home, back to Godhead. This is the perfection of highest mission of life. See, we have so many missions in life, right? Somebody wants to complete PhD, somebody wants to complete, the this and that. And there are so many missions that we have in human life, so many goals to reach. But the highest mission of life is Ante Nārāyaṇa Smriti, or going back home, back to Godhead. Right? And when a devotee, Prabhupada writes, devotee should be determined to go back home, back to Godhead by following the example of determination of Dhruva Mahārāja. Dhruva Mahārāja was not a fickle personality, Prabhupada writes. Right. Text 70. Maitreya uvacha iti devarshina proktam vishrutya jagati patihi rajalakshmim manavritya putrameva anvachintayan. Translation.
The great Maitreya continued, the king Uttānapāda, after being advised by Narada Muni, practically gave up all duties in relation with his kingdom, which was very vast and wide, opulent like the goddess of fortune, and he simply began to think of his son Dhruva. Hare Krishna.
So Narada Muni gave this instruction to Uttānapāda, and when King Uttānapāda heard such a glorious child, he Jagati Patihi, he was the Chakravarti Samrat, but he practically gave up all duties. He handed over all his duties to his ministers, and he was literally preparing for Vanaprastha kind of a life. And his kingdom was vast and wide and opulent like goddess of fortune. And he simply began to think of his son Dhruva. Very intensely he is thinking of his son. Now next 7 verses, 71 to 77, we see Dhruva's severe austerities. Right. This is the next section where Dhruva Mahārāja is performing severe austerities. Text 71. Tatrabhishakta prayatah tamo poshya vibhavarim samahita paryacharan rishiyadeshena purusham. Translation.
Elsewhere, Dhruva Mahārāja, having arrived at Madhuvan, took his bath in the river Yamuna and observed fasting in the night with great care and attention. After that, as advised by the great sage Narada, he engaged himself in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The significance of this particular verse is that Dhruva Mahārāja acted exactly according to the advice of his spiritual master, the great sage Narada. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti also advises that if we want to be successful in our attempt to go back to Godhead, we must very seriously act according to the instruction of the spiritual master. That is the way of perfection. There need be no anxiety over attaining perfection, because if one follows the instruction given by the spiritual master, he is sure to attain perfection. Our only concern should be how to execute the order of the spiritual master. A spiritual master is expert in giving special instructions to each of his disciples. And if the disciple executes the order of the spiritual master, that is the way of his perfection.
Elsewhere at Madhuvan, as instructed by Narada Muni, Dhruva Mahārāja took his bath in river Yamuna and observed fasting that night with great care and attention. Right. And here he engaged himself in worshipping the Supreme Lord as instructed by, as advised by Narada Muni. Srila Prabhupada writes very amazing purport. That this is the significance that Dhruva Mahārāja exactly acted according to the advice of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. Right. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Prabhupada quotes here, that if we want to be successful in our attempt to go back home, back to Godhead, right? Yasya prasadat Bhagavat prasado. Prabhupada writes, we must be very seriously act on the instructions given by the spiritual master. That is the way of perfection. So here the important thing is receiving instructions from spiritual master, and one should not fret about how to go back home, back to Godhead, how to cross Vaitarana. That is none of our concern. Our concern is to be engaged in devotional service, chanting 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra very attentively, follow 4 regulative principles very strictly, being meaningfully engaged as our Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru wants us to do. And Baki, to take care of the result is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to follow the process. Right. Prabhupada says here, there is no anxiety over attaining the perfection, because if one follows the instructions given by spiritual master, he is sure to attain the perfection. The only anxiety, only concern one should have is how to execute the instructions of the spiritual master. And here, Srila Prabhupada himself, he got an instruction at 22 that you are such a educated young man. Why don't you go to the Western world and preach the message? Prabhupada had some concern previously, and he had a debate with his spiritual master. And Prabhupada writes, my spiritual master defeated me. From the follower of Gandhi, I became follower of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then, because of being Grihastha Ashram, he could not immediately fulfill the instruction. But Prabhupada always kept that instruction within heart and guided his life in such a way that ultimately he gloriously fulfilled the instruction of his spiritual master. So, acting on the instruction of the spiritual master is success for the disciple. Success is not the success, right? So, the real success is to act on the instruction of the spiritual master. A spiritual master is expert in giving special instructions to each of his disciple. And if a disciple executes the order of the spiritual master, that is the way of perfection. Later we will see, therefore, Prahlad Maharaj, Supreme Lord is standing in front of him. One devotee, one incarnation, right? Narasimha appeared only for Prahlad. Prahlad Ahlad Daine. And what is the prayer of Prahlad? Prayer of Prahlad, he says, my dear Lord Narasimha, I could not serve my spiritual master very well, Narada Muni. Please award me the benediction that I will serve my spiritual master. Right? So this is the importance of following the instructions of the spiritual master. Prabhupada writes somewhere in Bhagavad Gita that instruction of the spiritual master should become life and soul for a disciple. And here exactly, Dhruva is just exactly following the instructions. And even in business world, even in other things, it is actually, research is not required in life. What is required is to follow the great example. We were setting up one business and we were meeting Gaurang Prabhu, and Gaurang Prabhu told us one glorious thing. He said that simply follow Mahajano Yena Gata Sapanta. If you want to expand in your business, follow the successful business people, what they are doing. Don't try to invent anything, just follow. There is a book also, it's a different topic it is, but it's a book about how to become successful in business. And he's, I think, Mohanish Pabrai. He talks about it. Dhando book he has written. He's $1 billion manager. And he says that I just shamelessly copied my senior in finance, and that was Warren Buffett. So the point here is, many times what happens is that we go on looking for so many different type of knowledge, different types of instruction, different type of research, and the execution is given very less importance. The most important part of the success is execution, right? And therefore, when we receive instruction from the spiritual master, execution is most important. Not just running after and trying to click selfies with the spiritual master. Of course, that is also important. But receiving the instruction, and where we will receive the instructions? By hearing the lectures of the spiritual master. When we hear Guru Vani is hearing the lectures given by one spiritual master, and one will very clearly know what is the mood and mission of my Guru, and one should follow that mood and mission with one's life and soul. And Maharaj Dhruva perfectly did that. He did not feel that, oh, why I should go to Vrindavan? Let me go to, some other place. Why Madhuvan? Let me do something else. Why this form of the Lord? Let me try something. Let me meditate on impersonal. Nothing. Dhruva was intense to follow the exact instructions of Narada Muni. And therefore, he got tremendous result in a very short time. Text 72. Triratrante, triratrante, kapitha badaraṣanah atmavritti anusarena masam nitye archayan harim. Translation.
For the first month, Dhruva Maharaj ate only fruits and berries on every third day, only to keep his body and soul together. And in this way, he progressed in his worship of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: Kopitha is a flower which is known in Indian vernacular as Kayeta. We do not find an English equivalent for the name of this flower, but its fruit is generally not accepted by human beings. It is eaten by monkeys in the forest. Dhruva Maharaj, however, accepted such fruits not for luxurious feasting, but just to keep his body and soul together. The body needs food, but a devotee should not accept foodstuff to satisfy the tongue in sense gratification. It is recommended in Bhagavad Gita that one should accept as much food as necessary to keep the body fit, but one should not eat for luxury. Dhruva Maharaj is an acharya, and by undergoing severe austerities and penances, he teaches us how one should execute devotional service. We must carefully know the process of Dhruva Maharaj's service. How severely he passed his days will be shown in later verses. We should always remember that to become a bona fide devotee of the Lord is not an easy task, but in this age, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, it has been made very easy. But if we do not follow even the liberal instructions of Lord Chaitanya, how can we expect to discharge our regular duties in devotional service? It is not possible in this age to follow Dhruva Maharaj in his austerity, but the principles must be followed. We should not disregard the regulative principles given by our spiritual master, for they make it easy for the conditioned soul. As far as our ISKCON movement is concerned, we simply ask that one observe the 4 prohibitive rules, chant 16 rounds, and instead of indulging in luxurious eating for tongue, simply accept prasad offered to the Lord. This does not mean that with our fasting, the Lord should also fast. The Lord should be given foodstuff, which is as nice as possible. But we should not make it an point to satisfy our own tongue. As far as possible, we should accept simple foodstuff just to keep the body and soul together to execute devotional service. It is our duty to remember always that in comparison to Dhruva Maharaj, we are insignificant. We cannot do anything like that Dhruva Maharaj did for self-realization because we are absolutely incompetent to execute such service. But by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, we have been given all concessions possible for this age. So at least we should always remember that neglect of our prescribed duties in devotional service will not make us successful in mission we have undertaken. It is our duty to follow in the footsteps of Dhruva Maharaj, for he was very determined. We should also be determined to finish our duties in executing devotional service in this life. We should not wait for another life to finish our job.
So Dhruva Maharaj, he began his austerities. Triratrante, triratrante. that for the first month of his austerity, Dhruva Mahārāja ate only fruits and berries on every third day. Right? So every third day, Dhruva Mahārāja was eating some fruits just to keep the body and soul together. And in this way, he progressed in his worship of the Supreme. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains which fruit he was taking. Kapitha. Kapitha is the kind of a fruit flower which is eaten by the monkeys, and it is not generally human consumption. And Dhruva was eating that kind of fruit. So when we say Dhruva was eating fruits once in 3 days, it was not some nice fruit dish, upar se some chat masala or something like that. He was eating kapitha fruit, which is generally eaten by the monkeys, that also once in 3 days. And Dhruva Maharaj, he accepted such fruits just to keep the body and soul together. And Prabhupada says Dhruva Maharaj is an acharya, undergoing the severe austerities and penances just to teach us how to execute devotional service. So sometimes devotional service is easy. It doesn't mean that we have to take it easily. We have to perform austerity and tapasya and dana, yagya dana tapa, pavanani manishinaha. It is very important. And therefore we see that the intense devotees, the way they are engaged in. Otherwise, under the name of Yukta Vairagya, there is always a possibility that we just become, Ganga Gai Ganga Das, Jamuna Gai Jamuna Das. And we say that everything is okay, Prabhuji. And, we have devotee shortcuts also, to make everything, to make feel or appear everything is okay. But there are devotees who are extremely intense. And progressively, again, this is progressively age appropriate, one has to intensify one's devotional service. That doesn't mean that we become irritable to other people, but that do mean that we have to intensify our devotional service. Prabhupada says, compared to Dhruva Maharaj, our instructions are very liberal instructions that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given. Mahaprabhu has given the path: chanting, dancing, feasting, chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day, follow 4 regulative principles. And here, because the description is around eating, eat only prashadam, right? So Prabhupada says, as far as possible, we simply ask our devotees to follow these principles, and then one can very easily advance in the process of devotional service. Prabhupada says it is our duty to remember our austerity in comparison to the austerities undertaken by great personalities like Dhruva Mahārāja, right? Dhruva Mahārāja is also performing Bhakti Yoga. We are also performing Bhakti Yoga. Dhruva Mahārāja is also trying to satisfy Lord Viṣṇu. We are also trying to satisfy Lord Viṣṇu as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is extremely liberal. Namo Mahavadanyaya. Gaurang Prabhu, in his class, he says, it's like you go to the class, you go to the exam, and the examiner says, you don't have to write anything, just write your roll number, and I will, give you 100 out of 100. This is Mahaprabhu's mercy. This is the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityanand Prabhu, and Srila Prabhupada. That by doing some very simple thing, which are very joyfully performed, susukham kartum avyayam, which will protect us from the influence of so many other things, by becoming devotee, we fall less sick. We save so much of money, right? Simply by avoiding the hotels and other things, we save so much of money. Simply by avoiding going to movies, so all different subscriptions people have and everything else. So it is all net gain for a devotee. And therefore one should know these are very minor austerities otherwise which are required to attain perfection in devotional service. We should always remember, Prabhupada writes, that neglect of our prescribed duties in devotional service will not make us successful, and thus we have to take the next birth to complete our devotional service. And Patana, in next birth, how many years we will be in some Swargaloka or something like that, how many years will pass on the earth planet, how much Kali Yuga will be advanced by that time, and whether the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will remain or not for us to take advantage. And therefore Prabhupada says, we should not wait for another life to finish our job. Finish your job right now, just like Maharaj Dhruva did by his intense austerity. Prabhupada says we don't have to do intense austerities, right? If we do, we will go mad and crazy and we'll die without any perfection. Dhruva Maharaj followed his spiritual master, Narada Muni. We have to follow our spiritual master. And we have to follow those instructions very carefully. Chanting 16 rounds very attentively, following 4 related principles, honoring prasadam, then we have sadhana, then we have sadachar, we have seva, offering various services in the temple and around in the preaching mission, and swadhyaya. And this is how one can actually advance very swiftly in devotional service. We will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you, Guruji. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Hare
everyone.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Guruji. Thank you,
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.